From the darkest reaches of space to the deepest corners of your mind. Welcome to From the Void.
Esther Cox, you are mine to kill. Those words, scratched into the wall of a quiet home in Amherst, Nova Scotia, weren't written by a person. At least, not one anyone could see. They were carved by something else. Something that stalked an 18-year-old girl through the halls of her home and beyond. Between 1878 and 1879, what began as whispers and knocks exploded into full-blown terror. Fires ignited from nowhere. Furniture hurled itself across the rooms. And a young woman became the epicenter of one of the most violent poltergeist hauntings ever recorded. This is not just a ghost story. It's a story of trauma, of doubt, and of what happens when the human mind, or something darker, pushes past its limits. I'm John Williamson, and this is From the Void. The town of Amherst, Nova Scotia, in the late 1870s was the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. A small, God-fearing community built on timber and textiles, more concerned with Sunday sermons than the supernatural. That would change. At the center of it all was Esther Cox, just 18 years old. She lived with her sister Olive and Olive's husband, Daniel Teed, in a modest wooden house shared with other family members. By all accounts, Esther was bright and kind, if a little anxious. And that anxiety would soon have a source. In the summer of 1878, Esther was courted by a local man named Bob McNeil, who boarded with the Teed family. But what began as a flirtation turned dark. One night, Bob lured Esther out alone, pulled a revolver, and attempted to assault her. She escaped, but something inside her broke. She returned home, shaken, withdrawn, and changed. What happened next is still debated by historians and paranormal investigators. But whether it was the trauma or something much stranger, within days, the disturbances began. The first signs were almost easy to dismiss. Strange knocking sounds coming from the walls. Footsteps in the attic when no one was up there. Then, Esther fell violently ill, feverish, convulsing, and unable to speak. Her family believed she had an infection until they watched her bedclothes tear off of her while she slept, as if yanked by unseen hands. And that was only the beginning. Esther's family watched in helpless disbelief as the activity intensified. Knocks turned into bangs, like cannon blasts inside the walls. Dishes flew from shelves. Chairs tipped over. Footsteps paced back and forth in empty rooms. And Esther, now recovering physically, seemed to be the focus of it all. One night, she screamed in terror, pointing to the wall. Scratched into the plaster were the words, "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill." There was no one else in the room. The family called in help. A local doctor witnessed Esther's bed move on its own and saw a pillow rise into the air and strike her face. Religious leaders were consulted. Some believe Esther was possessed. Others suspected fraud, but couldn't explain how she could create so much destruction without being seen. Then came the fires. Word spread. People from all over Amherst began gathering outside the Teed home at night, hoping to witness the disturbances. Many did. And for them, there was no hoax to uncover, only something no one could understand. Afraid for her family's safety, Esther left the home to stay with relatives. But whatever force haunted her didn't stay behind. The phenomena followed her. She was beaten by invisible hands. Her skin erupted with strange swellings. Voices called her name. And in one case, a loud gunshot rang out, though no firearm was ever found. Wherever Esther went, the house screamed. By the fall of 1878, Esther Cox was no longer just a troubled girl in a small town. She was a local spectacle, and not everyone believed she was the victim. Rumors spread like wildfire that Esther was summoning spirits, that she was possessed, or that she was faking everything for attention. Even as dozens of eyewitnesses swore to what they'd seen, flying objects, spontaneous fires, and voices with no source, the narrative began to shift. Esther took a job working at a nearby farm owned by a man named Arthur Davidson. She was quiet, kept to herself, but the disturbances followed. And then one day, another fire. A barn was nearly destroyed. There was no proof she'd caused it, and no one could explain how, but Esther was arrested. She was charged with arson and sentenced to 30 days in jail. She served 8. For the first time in months, Esther was in a place where nothing could follow her. And just like that, the poltergeist went quiet. When she returned home, the violent activity had almost entirely ceased. A few unexplained bangs, a rattling bedpost, but nothing like before. It was as if whatever had stalked her had spent itself, or moved on. Esther's body had endured months of torment. She was burned, bruised, exhausted, and she was only 19 years old. But her story wasn't over, because one man believed her, and he would make it his mission to tell the world what she endured. In the spring of 1878, Walter Hubbell arrived in Amherst. He was a traveling stage actor with a growing obsession, the paranormal. When he heard whispers of a haunted girl in Nova Scotia, he packed his bags and headed north. Not to perform on stage, but to witness something otherworldly. He asked to live with the Teed family, to eat with them, to sleep under the same roof, and, if the stories were true, to see the ghost for himself. He got more than he bargained for. According to Hubbell, during the 6 weeks he lived in the house, he witnessed a bed lifting from the floor, a pocket knife flying through the air and stabbing Esther's back, bedsheets torn by unseen hands, writing appearing on walls spontaneously, and even a blinding flash of light with no source. Hubbell later wrote, "I saw with my own eyes a pillow rise from the floor, float across the room, and strike Esther full in the face, leaving a red welt." He claimed to have seen her levitate, twisting and writhing in the air, screaming as if gripped by something unseen. And while skeptics accused him of exaggerating or chasing fame, many of the phenomena he documented had already been witnessed by others, doctors, priests, and neighbors. In 1879, Hubbell published The Great Amherst Mystery. It was a strange mix of first-hand experience, testimony from witnesses, and spiritual speculation. The book was a modest success and helped preserve Esther's story in vivid, often horrifying detail. But the more Hubbell published, the more skeptics pushed back. Critics accused him of being a con artist, said Esther was mentally unstable, or worse, that she was faking it all for attention. But if so, she'd been willing to endure arrest, exile, and near death in exchange for nothing. Esther never publicly denied the haunting. She never tried to capitalize on it, and she never explained what happened. Esther Cox eventually married, had a child, and lived out her life in relative quiet. She never sought fame, never tried to sell her story, and she never again experienced anything like what happened in Amherst. As for Walter Hubbell, he faded into obscurity. His book, The Great Amherst Mystery, is still in print today, mostly through small press reissues and paranormal archives. Some called him a huckster, others a witness. He died in 1929, still claiming that everything he saw was real. The most stubborn unbeliever, if he had seen what I have seen, would have become convinced that there are invisible intelligences. So what really happened at that house? Some believe Esther was suffering from dissociative trauma, that the assault she endured triggered a psychological break, manifesting in what today might be called Poltergeist syndrome, or psychokinetic disturbance, that somehow her emotional pain had been externalized, violently. Others claim it was a ghost, or even a demonic entity, preying on a vulnerable girl in a vulnerable time. Skeptics still say it was a hoax, perpetuated by a frightened teenager, sustained by mass hysteria, and exaggerated by a publicity-hungry writer. But here's the thing. How did she pull it off across multiple homes, in front of dozens of witnesses, including doctors, clergy, and neighbors? And why, after being arrested, humiliated, and disbelieved, did she never try to profit from it? The Great Amherst Poltergeist remains one of the most violent and well-documented cases of alleged paranormal activity in North American history. And like so many stories told here on From the Void, the truth may be stranger and sadder than any explanation we can offer. Thank you for joining me for this episode of From the Void. If you want to see archival photos of the Teed home, read excerpts from Walter Hubbell's 1879 book, or share your own theory about the case, visit www.fromthevoidpod.com. And if this episode left you wondering what really happened to Esther Cox, you're not alone. Until next time, I'm John Williamson. Stay curious.